Sorry guys, I just choked on my spit. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Big City B. I'm B if you're joining us for the first time. Today we're going to be jumping right into our book review. Our book today is going to be Death With Interruptions by Jose Saramago. The genre is going to be fiction, kind of fantasy, I guess, although I would just say it's more of a realistic fiction. The original language is actually Portuguese and it's been edited into English. Jose Saramago is actually a Nobel Peace Prize author. I haven't read any of his other books, but I found this randomly on Goodreads using their random book generator, and I wanted to give it a try because I thought the summary sounded really interesting. So that leads me to what the summary of the book is. Here it is. What happens when the Grim Reaper decides there will be no more death? On the first day of the new year, no one dies. This, of course, causes consternation among politicians, religious leaders, morticians, and doctors. Among the general public, on the other hand, this is a cause for initial mass celebration. Then reality hits home. Families are left to care for the permanently dying. Life insurance policies become meaningless, and funeral parlors are reduced to arranging burials for pets. Death sits in her chilly apartment where she lives alone with the scythe and filing cabinets and contemplates her experiment. What if no one ever died again? What if she, Death with a small d, became human and were to fall in love? So that summary sounds super interesting and intriguing to me. I haven't read a whole lot of books where death is portrayed as having feelings or kind of insight into what they're doing, especially death being portrayed as female. Maybe that's just because in English, death doesn't have a gender associated with the word death, but in other languages, death is usually gendered female, which I find interesting. So let's go on to what characters are within this book. So of course we have death with a little d. Then we have the mafia with a PH instead of an F. We have the prime minister, generally the prime minister's staff, the commissioner of television, and the cellist. One quote from this book, scratch that. I'm going to start with what I liked about this book. What I liked about this book was that I thought it was an interesting interpretation of death. Something that is brought up over the course of the book is if there are multiple deaths that deal with different sectors of life. So is there a separate death for the human? Is there a separate death for the grass? Is there a separate death for the planets and the cosmos? So I thought that was an intriguing kind of thought process to go on. So this quote that I'm going to share with you actually kind of joins together with what I liked about the book. Have you ever wondered if death is the same for all living beings, be they animals, human beings included, or plants? From the grass you walk on to the 100-meter tall sequioadendron giganteum. Will the death that kills a man who knows he's going to die be the same for a horse who never will? So again, that kind of goes back to, are there multiple deaths? I guess that's something that we don't really know, if there's one overarching death for everything and everyone, or if it's subdivided into different subspecies, I guess. Moving on to what I didn't like about the book. Okay, so the dialogue in this book is horrendous. It's unbearable. I hated it so much because there are no quotation marks or he said, she said to differentiate the characters speaking. So all that there is a comma in between sentences and no real ending punctuation. So this gets really difficult because when a person's talking, naturally there are going to be commas within the sentence, and Jose would have someone jump in, but you wouldn't know if it was the previous person speaking or the second character speaking, and it just got really confusing to keep track of who was saying what and who had what thoughts, and it was very annoying, and I hated it. I hated it. It was so frustrating to read. I really hated it. And it's an issue because there's a lot of dialogue in the book. Number 2. So Death, in the summary, is portrayed to be a main character in the story. I'm gonna throw in my spoiler slide here. Spoilers! Death is not a main character. I was reading the book with Libby, an app by Overdrive, which lets me take out books from the library without actually having to go in person, which is fantastic in the cold New York winters. But I can also see what percentage of the book I'm actually at while I'm reading. So I discovered that while I was reading, I'm waiting for Death to arrive because I know that she comes in. It's in the summary. I'm reading, 25%, 50%, 75%. Death doesn't come in until 80% of the book. 80% of the way through the book, the main character finally arrives. That's ridiculous. Okay, so then our second main character is the cellist. And he doesn't arrive until 90% of the book is over, which means you have an ending point of 10% of the book in which Death and the cellist actually interact, actually have their relationship build to what causes Death to want to be alive and be human again. So to me, that makes no sense. Why would you have your character show up 90% of the way through the book? The other thing that I didn't like was that the book talks in general. So there's never a specific mafia person that we are speaking to or we hear from. It just tends to be the mafia as a group talking to the prime minister. None of the prime minister's staff get names, which is a little frustrating because they are a majority of the book. So you want to get an emotional connection with any of them, and you just can't because it's all general. Also, they go into great details about how the economy would fare and the discussion of between religious leaders of if death isn't real, and does that mean God isn't real, or does God create death, and does that mean he's a punishing God or a merciful God? So it just goes on, and which is fine. If I had gone into reading the book knowing that that was going to be what the subject was, fine, I could have gotten behind it. I still don't think I would have liked it, but I would have gotten through it and not been as frustrated. But that's not the premises that we were given. So it was very annoying to read all of these long, lengthy, very scholarly pages and sentences and paragraphs, but it's supposed to be a fiction fantasy book, so that it was just annoying. And I feel like a lot of people jumped to conclusions or jumped to making rash decisions, which maybe is true. You know, the coronavirus thing is kind of like the situation where people are making rash decisions to stock up on toilet paper, even though they don't really need toilet paper. But yeah, I just thought it was boring. It was boring and very wordy for what was being discussed. So I guess this is going to be a brief book review because I don't have a whole lot to say about it. The book itself was very short, only about, I think on the Libby app, which maybe adds a couple more pages because of just the way the screen size makes the pages. I think it was only like 230 pages, but it took me a long time to read because there is so much dialogue that doesn't have specific punctuation, like I said, and it just, you have to go back and reread sentences so many times, which I don't think is a sign of a good book. So I'm really kind of interested in what Jose Saramago wrote that earned him the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah, let's just jump on it. We're gonna jump on to, would I recommend this book? Unfortunately, no. I wouldn't recommend this book. I don't think if you bring in the subject of the book after 90% of the book or 80% of the book is done, it's a good book. It can't be a good book in my opinion, because the rest of your story is condensed into 20%. 10% if you're gonna add the love interest that Death has. So no, I don't think it was a good book. For me, it was just very dense, very scholarly, academic writing that wasn't really intriguing. There was nothing that caught my eye at all. I thought that when Death finally did appear, that it got better, but I read so many reviews or questions on Goodreads of asking if the book was gonna get better, and there were some people who like really loved it, and they're like, yes, I loved it when Death came in, it was fantastic, one of my favorite books of the year, and I didn't feel that way. I didn't, I'm sorry. So no, I wouldn't recommend this. I mean, like I said before, by all means take what I say with a grain of salt, but I just don't think this is a good book if you're looking for a story based on if Death were to become human and fall in love, because that story isn't this story. If you're interested in a story about what and how the government would react and do in the event of Death being gone from the country, then yes, go ahead and read it. Maybe you'll really like this. And if you like really dense academic writing, go ahead and read this, but it's not my jam. It's not my jam, and I didn't really like it. So that's my review. I just wanted to also do this book review to show you that I'm not only going to review books that I really love and I am always recommending. There are going to be books that I don't enjoy. But make sure you hit that like button down below if you liked this review. I don't know. And then hit that subscribe button if you want to keep in touch for future videos and future reviews. If you have any recommendations of what you want me to read, go ahead and leave it down in the comments. I'm going to be checking those out and adding books to my reading list, so hopefully you'll find your recommendations soon. If you have any questions about this book, let me know down in the comments. Or if you know a book that actually talks about death in a personified way that stops death or killing in order to fall in love, drop that title down, because that's the book I want to read. All right, guys, you have a good one. Bye.